And we are live in theory. I'm always never sure about these sorts of things until at least some of the attendees start to show up here. We have our first attendee. Yep, so it looks like the miracle is happening again. So we'll just wait another minute or two for the attendees to trickle in. And
hi, Rick.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm all right. How are you? Hi, Eleanor.
Hello.
Reg,
yes,
could you send the link to Penny again? She's having trouble getting in. It's telling her she can't sign on in Google or Chrome.
okay. Copy link. I'll send her a link to come in as a participant and see if that helps. And we can promote her to default email. Penny Kirk. Okay, just set that. Well, why don't we go ahead and call the meeting to order while Penny is getting logged in here. And this is a special board meeting on the Needham Housing Authority proposed 2022 budget. And we're holding this meeting virtually as permitted under the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law amendments to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, which allows us to do this. And I'm going to call the roll. Reg Foster is here.
Eleanor Edwards here.
Ed Scheidler here.
Okay, we're expecting Penny Kirk to join us in a moment. And we'll wait for that to happen here. I'll just note for the record here that we have three attendees, showing three and counting as four. Kalpana, Rachel Primless, and Steve Scalafiti. I'm sure I got that pronunciation incorrect here. Apologies here. So before we get going too, and while we're waiting for the tech support to happen, I received news from Janice Bennett that there had been a death in her family recently, and it was not likely that she was be able to join us tonight. She was going to see, how things were going, and of course, that's a terrible thing. We've all been there, and she sends her apologies for missing the meeting tonight if she isn't here. She may pop in, but my expectation is that's not going to happen here. So it'll just be the four commissioners here tonight. Ed, has Penny received the email I sent? Although I'm not sure it's going to work for her to be in the background there. We may get feedback or something.
We'll both stay muted when we're not speaking.
Maybe you want to just share the same screen too, so we can get going here. You want to try that? Uh-huh.
Getting close.
That was the good noise there. So I have Penny Kirk showing up here shortly. I'll send Penny a message to start her video and see if that works.
All right.
There we go. All right. You want to adjust the tilt on your screen there, Penny, if you can hear us. Yeah, hear me. Okay, I think we're good to go here, Rick. And as I said, tonight's, I'm just going to start off with chair's announcements to begin with. Actually, I do have a announcement at the CPC meeting yesterday evening, which is their first meeting to discuss the 12 CPA applications for funding that came in, 4 of which was from the Needham Housing Authority. And the first meeting is to assess all the applications to see if they're eligible for CPA funding. And I'm happy to report that the 4 applications passed the first hurdle as being eligible for CPA funding. We are, next meeting is on the 22nd of December, where the committee is putting together questions. And our first hearing to do a deep dive is scheduled for January 12th, 2022. The game's afoot and it's moving along. So with that, I would just want to introduce Rick Shaw, who has been our fee accountant for, I don't know how long, Rick, very
Pretty
long, longer than I have been here.
Yeah.
And he works for Milne Shaw and Robard. We're familiar with him because we get his monthly reports, financial reports, and we have the pleasure of meeting with him once a year, so that he, along with Angie, can present the Needham Housing Authority fiscal 2022 proposed budget and field our questions. Just for the sake of clarity, I want to let everybody know that this is not High Rock Homes LLC. So this is Needham Housing Authority, which covers Seabeds and Cook, and High Rock are federal properties, and Linden Chambers and Matthews House are state subsidized properties. So that's what we're considering tonight. So I turn the floor over to you, Rick, and Angie, and take it from here.
All right. Okay. So I think everybody has the packet. I number the pages in the top right. It's pretty much the identical package as last year. I double checked what I did last year. I just try to be consistent. Just a couple things of the big picture items that aren't really budget specific, but one of the things over the last couple of years, as time has gone on, the Housing Authority has gotten to the point where all the programs have relatively healthy reserves. That has not always been the case. There were times where the Section 8 program was pretty much broke. The state program was pretty much down to like a reserve of $30,000. But over the last couple of years, due to some of the CARES money that's come in and just some additional allowable expenses, the reserves have kind of leveled off so that you don't have any programs that are kind of in dire straits, which is good. You're healthy all the way across the board. The 2 things specifically that are in this budget this year that are, that were requested for me to put in was 1, to budget for an office for the administrative office, a rental expense outside of where it is now. I think everybody has already talked about that. And the other thing is putting in a position as an assistant executive director into the budget. Those are kind of the 2 key big changes from last year to this year. Putting in an assistant executive director and budgeting, and I think Angie gave me a number of $70,000 to budget for rental space for the administrative office. So that's in this budget. So one of the things last year, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but when we did the budgets last year, DHCD had a 4% cut in your allowable spending. That's page 1. This is your state budget, basically. This is the entire budget. This is your operating expenses, your reserve analysis, pretty much the whole thing. Last year, they originally had a 4% cut in your allowable expenses. So we did the budgets on time, like we always do. And then after that, they changed their minds. And instead of a 4% cut, they level funded it. So they allowed us to get that subsidy, but we didn't change the budgets for it. So that's why if you look at the 2021 line total of 556,000 and the 2022 total of 602, you can see it's an 8% increase, a little bit over 8%, because this year in the fiscal year 22, they're allowing a 4% increase. So it's really 4% over last year because they had a cut that they didn't implement. And they also increased it by another 4% this year. So that number is a formula that I tie out to. That's actually page 2 that I can show you just so you can see how it ties out in my calculation. And then what I do when I do the budgets, when I do anybody's budgets, the first thing I usually do is I put in all the insurance policies, any of the retirement bills, health insurance, all of those, because those are pretty much set. I mean, those are almost actuals. It might change a little bit here, might change a little bit here. But, those are pretty much actual numbers. So you had an extra $40,000 to deal with. And what I'm going to do is just go over a couple of the differences this year. The state's allowing a 4% increase in administrative salaries. You can see that went up by more than 12%. And that's because there was a resident service coordinator position that was changed to full-time. And there was a position added that we can go over. That'll be page 3. We'll talk about that when we get to it, called a public relations officer. You already have that expense, except they're a contract person now. And if they're going to stay and it's going to be a permanent position, it really should be in the payroll. So it was moved to salaries as opposed to a contract person. And besides that, nobody else got over 4%. In terms of the executive director, all the executive directors' salaries in the state are frozen for now because the state's coming out with a new salary schedule. It was supposed to be out by now to implement a new maximum. So when that schedule comes out, I will prepare it and the board can vote whatever they want to vote in terms of the director's salary. But DHCD wants the budgets in before that comes out because they don't want everybody sitting. They'd have, I've done 20 budgets already. They don't want 20 budgets sitting there waiting for the schedule to come out, or they'll never get them approved. It'll be 6 months from now, none of the budgets will be approved. So when that salary schedule comes out, I will fill it out because I do it for all my clients. And then the board can decide what they want to do with it in terms of the increase amount of I have no idea what it's going to be. Normally these type of things, I have a clue. I can say it might be 4%, it might be 6%. I have absolutely no idea. Nobody's given me even a hint. So we'll see what that comes out to. And then at some point later in the year, there'll have to be some kind of revision to put whatever the salary is if it changes. The legal expense went up, $5,200, $4,000 of that increase, the state is actually funding you. So normally we budget, and you guys do use an outside law firm more than a lot of housing authorities. You used to use some housing authorities use the pilot attorneys, who historically might not have been quite as efficient. The pilot attorneys, a lot of them retired or left. So the state gave the housing authorities, and it's in your subsidy number, an extra $4,000, in your case, an extra $4,000 to cover some of your legal costs. And since last year you spent about $25,000, I bumped it up as much as I could based on the spending. Travel went down, but I did not increase travel. So this is where it gets a little tricky. But the reason why travel went down is because this is the first year that you are running your Section 8 program. So when you start running your Section 8 program, they should absorb some of the administrative costs, which would be some of the travel costs. So if a board member went to a training or a conference or something like that, some of that cost should get charged to the Section 8 program. They should on a proration basis. That's why it went down. I didn't decrease the line item. It just went down because it's spread out more to the other programs. Accounting stayed the same. I have a 2-year contract, so that doesn't go up. The audit is an AUP. Really, you have two things with the state. You have called an agreed upon procedures that they do for the state and your actual audit. The agreed upon procedures, that's a set amount. DHCD sets that. They can't really increase that. That's what it's going to be. Administrative other, the reason why that went up, I didn't really, we're a little bit over this year, but the reason why it went up more is because of the office rent. So I guess the idea, unless somebody tells me that's not the idea, is to move the office out of the complex and rent some office space. So that's in the budget. So that's in the budget. I could get it to fit. I was a little concerned that it might be a little tight, but it's not tight. You're all set. I mean, yep, go ahead.
You're
I can't
on
hear
mute,
you.
Ed.
I can't hear you. I think, are you muted, Ed?
I'm sorry, I apologize, Rick.
All right, I just didn't know. Okay,
On the icon instead of the wrong icon.
I can
The
relate.
question is, can we ask questions as we go, or should we wait until you're finished with a page, for example?
Can I get through this and then maybe I'll answer your question as I'm doing it, and then we'll do it that way? I mean, usually I would just present and then answer all the questions at the end.
Whatever works for you.
Why don't we go ahead and do it the way it works for Rick? And if you just keep a note of what you want to ask a question about, then we can circle back.
I mean, it was a
Not a
specific
problem.
about the office rent. I mean, I'll answer it right now.
Well, I was going to ask you, where is the rent, but
It's in the 4190 account.
yeah, Linden Chambers is a substantial portion of our whole program. And you're talking about budgeting $65,000 or $70,000 for rent, and you've only got 10,000 allocated here, and it seems like anything else is going to be very lopsided.
Well, when you add it all up, it really isn't that lopsided.
And how much of administrative other
so
is
wait a
rent?
minute.
All 10,576 rent, or is only a portion of that?
Let's let Rick get all the way through
Oh,
it.
okay.
and
Well,
then
hold
we
on.
do what we
No.
try to
So you got to
do.
remember that we also had the public relations officer, or that whatever the heck that guy's called, public relations officer that I took out. So the office rent that's being charged there, this is everything in 4190. This includes the phone bill, office supplies, everything, postage, and then $25,000 of the rent of the $70,000 is going to this program, which is a proration based on units.
Okay, so where's the $25,000? I don't, administrative others, 10,005.
No, that's the amount of the increase.
Administrative salaries are going up 17. I don't know, is $15,000 of the administrative salaries dedicated to this new PR person?
Well, you can see that. That's on page 3. We're going to go over that when we get to page 3.
Okay,
So, maintenance labor, just so everybody understands how maintenance labor works, that is governed by labor and industry. So whatever the increases are for labor and industry is what the maintenance men get. And that letter usually comes out in March, and that's effective April 1st. Whatever they are, that's the actual rate. Gary is administrative, so he's different. He doesn't get L&I. He's more of a supervisory position. I'm going to skip contract costs, because what I will say with contract costs is that's really all your turnover costs, any upgrades in the units, plumbing, and when I'm done with everything else, whatever's left goes in that line item. So just remember that. Insurance went way up because the state property insurance went up dramatically. It went up pretty significantly. It went from 22,000 to 30,000. Workers' comp went up another 15%. So your insurances went up, and there's really nothing you can do about that. They go up every single year. The property insurance has gone up significantly the last couple of years. And, so when you get to the end, whatever I had left, I put in the maintenance contract line item because that's the wild card line item. We don't know how many turnovers you're going to have during the year. So we want to build that up as much as we can. And remember, so you've got $602,000 budgeted. All right. That's a formula. Anything you spend under that goes into your operating reserve. You don't have to give it back. It doesn't go anywhere. Anything you spend over that comes out of your operating reserve. So that's what they give you to spend. And if you underspend it, it will go into your operating reserve for future reference, which is what's happened in the past. So you really, very rarely have you spent your entire budget, which is why you do have a reserve. And because you're budgeted basically to break even. That's how subsidy works. You're budgeted to break even based on the $602,000. Once we put in the income and the utilities, it's based on that number of 602. So it's their actual expenses. If you go like 2/3 of the way down, so you're budgeted to break even at this point, with your regular operating expenses. One of the things that I really preach to all my clients is you also have state capital money. All right, so you have projects, whether it's roofs or paving or kitchens or whatever it is. When you have those jobs, you're allowed to requisition admin money. So say the contractor was paid $300,000. You can requisition in that project $30,000 of admin money. With that $30,000, it's not part of the subsidy calculation, so you get to keep it. It flows right in your operating reserve. So one of the things I talk to Angie and Gary about is every time you have a mod job, and Angie can attest to this, you have to get in the habit of requisitioning that 10% because they don't volunteer it. You have to ask for it and you have to requisition it. I have clients that get that 10% every single time, and it's a way to build up the reserve so that you can do things later in the future, whether you need a new truck, you need some new equipment, whatever you need, you've got that flexibility to do it. So I talked to Gary about that, and he's estimating that he's going to be able to get about $30,000 of admin money with the current mod jobs in the state that are coming up this year. The other thing that they're giving you some extra money for is, I don't even know where these stovetop fire stoppers. So whatever those are, I mean, I'm not a maintenance guy. I don't really know what they are, but you got $45 per unit for each unit. If you spend it, you get the money to cover it. If you don't spend it, you got to give that back. So if you spend money on this fire stoppers on the stoves, then they're funding the first $6,800 of that. So keep that in mind. And then after that, then you have like a non-routine list, which Gary gave me, a non-routine list. And I put in everything on his list in terms of equipment. Once again, that's a page further down that we'll look at as we flip through. So in the end, with $50,000 of non-routine, because you're getting the admin money for those projects, you're budgeted to run at a little deficit of about $13,000. That's if you spend every single dime in the budget. You really very rarely spend every single dime in the budget. It just usually doesn't happen. And even if you did, your reserve would be projected to be about $225,000. You can see that at the bottom, 226. And, just to give you an idea of what's happened over the years, in 2017, the reserve for this program was $30,000. So you've gotten the reserve to a level that is $60,000, $65,000, $70,000 above the DHCD recommended amount. And the reason why that's important is because DHCD has this program called a performance management review. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. I think they're going to start doing that again. I think they stopped for a year or two because of the pandemic. And one of the things they look at is the reserve level. and they want to make sure you're over the 35, their level that they want you to be at, which is 35%, which you're over that by 70%. So financially, you'll get good grades on the financial indicators in your performance management review. Just so you know, some people think that's important. Some people, you know, don't really hold much weight into it, but it gets published. So it's always better to have good scores than bad scores. So that's your state budget. And you can see that if you spend every dime in this budget, your reserve would be $226,000. You know, $200,000 more than it was 4 or 5 years ago. So that's where we are. Page 2 is just how did I get to that 602? Yep, go ahead.
Out of curiosity, why not reclassify the share of our public relations person as an administrative salary instead of administrative other?
I did.
You just told me that part of the administrative other, the 10,576 included.
No, I said that he got taken out of that line item.
Out of
He
the
got taken-
administrative other line item?
That's right. He
That
got taken
that
out
line
of that.
item still went up 10,576.
That's because there was $25,000 of the office rental space charged there.
Why not put that to rent instead of administrative other, so we have a better idea of where this money is going?
Because that's the line item that the state doesn't have a rent.
Okay,
No, that's rental expense. Okay, so these are the line items and the accounts that the state uses.
okay,
So when I do a financial statement, I have to use their accounts. I understand what you're saying,
okay.
of breaking it out more, you know, but that's the way they have it reported. And
All right.
unfortunately,
After you have
4190
it, that's fine.
covers like 12 different things. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So, but I understand what you're saying. Like, why isn't that broken out more? You know, and you know what? Next year, I'll put another 4190 and just show the office the amount that's getting charged for the office.
Okay.
But on the budget that actually gets submitted, it would be combined. But for you guys, I can separate it. That's easy.
That would be great. I would appreciate it.
Piece of cake.
Thank you.
No problem. So page 2 is just how the $602,000 gets calculated. Go ahead, Penny.
May I, we said, Rick, that we would stop at each page for questions. And I
Okay.
see we got 2 more questions. Then we'll go
Right.
on. Yeah, go ahead. Penny, you're next.
Okay. One question
Yeah,
about
one of you
resident
has to mute.
services.
One of you has to mute. Yeah.
The budget remains the same for resident services every year. They never get any more.
Wait a minute. We're still getting a
that.
feedback here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you've got to turn yours way down.
My speaker's on the other side. Can you turn yours down?
Mine is down. It's far down as well.
Okay, that's
Sorry
getting
about
worse.
that. The.
Either that or the aliens are
resident
coming to
services
get
budget
us at
is
this
always the
point. One of the
same.
two here.
It never goes up.
Okay,
there
we
a
can hear
reason
you,
for that?
Penny, so go ahead.
Are you hearing me?
Yeah, we're hearing you, Penny,
Oh,
and
I'm not muted,
Go ahead,
we hear
Penny.
you, Penny.
Penny, you're good.
but he's muted.
So we can't hear
Wait a
Penny.
minute, let me try. Okay, I can hear you now. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead,
Yep.
Penny. Penny, can you hear us?
I can't.
Okay, go
We've been
ahead
having to
with your
change our
question.
speakers. My question, did you hear my question, Rick?
No,
No.
I'm sorry. The resident services budget remains the same every year. Is there a reason for that?
That's a formula. That's a DATD number. It's an amount per unit. That's not the resident service coordinator that you have as an employee. That's for like organization, a tenant organization, and any expenses that they incur. The resident coordinator is a salaried position in your budget.
I realize that, but doesn't the resident coordinator have a certain budget that they can spend on events like, coffee hours?
Well,
and-
that would be, yes. But that's not, this is for a resident.
Organization?
It's more for a resident organization and any expenses they incur.
Well, wouldn't it be labeled then resident organization? That's a different thing. They do get a budget. the organization.
Okay, well,
Service.
if they have a budget and they submit invoices and you pay them, then that's the line item it should go to.
Okay, I guess they're aware of that.
And
And I think you answered why the employee benefits were reduced.
Yeah, actually, your health insurance costs went down, which is very unusual. But I think with all the turnover, there were more people on health insurance before. So, I double checked them. Trust me, that's one of the numbers I check because that's a big expense. And when that went down slightly because the health insurance cost for the housing authority went down. Not a lot, but they did go down a little bit.
Okay, those are my questions. You answered I had a lot of other questions, but you answered them well.
Okay, that's what I try to do. I've
Eleanor,
been doing this a long time. I try to answer as many questions as I can
Ahead of time.
while I'm doing it, Go ahead, Eleanor.
Yeah, so along the lines of Ed's question about like for next year, getting a breakdown of at least the administrative, I guess it was administrative other line. I'm just curious for when this shows the past year's budgets, could we see next year the past year's actuals?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I can cater it any way you want.
Okay.
So what I could have done is done 2020, because obviously 2021 is not over
Right,
yet.
right, yeah.
So I'm writing a note right now on my stuff to make that first column on the left.
Yeah.
That'll be 2021 actuals next year.
Okay, great,
So you can
thanks.
see what was actually, yeah, that's a good idea. I do that already in some places. Whatever you guys want, I can make the reports, as legible or informative as, whatever's important to you guys, I can make that format. I do it all the time. I cater to whatever my client wants. So
Okay.
yes, piece of cake.
Great, thank you.
All right.
may I add to that maybe then, Rick, which is assuming all the rest of the commissioners thinks Eleanor's idea is a good idea, I certainly do. Is this something that you can just do quickly? So if we do in fact approve this budget tonight, you could generate easily without a lot of extra effort, a version of this that had fiscal 20 actuals in it.
I could probably do that. Yeah.
Okay. All right, go ahead on to the next page there then.
All right. So this is really just a page to see where that $602,000 came from. That's on the front page. That's all it is. It's just how the cap is calculated. You can see I took the 2022 number, multiplied it by 4%. You can see, you just go down to the bottom little section there that says 2022. I just put the other years in there just as to see what's going on. And you can see that line item that says exemptions and it's frozen. So like years and years and years ago, they let me they basically would pay for if your retirement bill went up, or I actually have it on this other computer. So if I'm looking to the side, I'm just looking up some things. Let's see. So for example, property insurance went up. In the old days, if it went up $10,000, I could increase my allowable spending cap by $10,000. About 5 years ago or 8 years, they froze it. So they let us still build in the $52,033, which is basically retirees' health insurance, the retirement bill that kept increasing in health insurance, but they don't let me increase it anymore. So that's why it's been the same for like 8 years. They will not, you have to absorb any increases in your health insurance or retirement bill in whatever they fund you, and you cannot put it in as an add-on like you used to. But they let you put the add-on in that you had like 8 years ago. So they're still paying for a portion of it. They just won't let you increase that number and pay for more of it, because the numbers were getting ridiculous and how much the cost that the state was absorbing in these exemptions. So that's just how that works. They pay for a portion of some of your health insurance, and a couple other things here. Let me see. Retirees, group insurance, property insurance. Yeah, that's pretty much what I said. And they do pay for the resident coordinator that's in this budget. I put that in as an exemption every year and they pay for that. Just so you know, the state's always paid for that since day one, before I even started. And I've been there for 20 years, for crying out loud. So page 3 of the salary is the salary schedule. And this is for the entire housing authority. Go ahead, Ed. You gotta unmute. You gotta unmute.
Trying to get there. Thank you. Can you help me understand what total exemptions frozen consists of?
Yes, it consists of, so like I just said, 8 years ago, you had exemptions of $52,000, which covered retirees' health insurance, because when somebody retires, they stay on your health insurance.
Okay,
So you were allowed in the old days to keep adding on to that exemption as more and more people retired. Then DHCD said, nope, that's it. Whatever we've given you in the past, you can put that in next year, but you can't increase it.
okay, gotcha. Thank you
That's
very
why
much.
it's $52,000 every single year,
Okay,
because they won't let me increase it. I've
you.
tried that in other places, and my job is to try to get you guys as much money as I can. And I just know if I put in any extra money, they kick the budget back and say, you know better, basically. So that's what that is.
Good.
So you get $52,000 more than your allowable spending because of these exemptions that were put in
Thank you.
8 years ago. Page 3 is the salaries. There's really not too much differences other than, well, there are some differences. The director's the same. You look at the second line, you can see we added in an assistant executive director, which obviously hasn't been hired yet. There probably you might underrun that line item because, it's December 9th. I don't know how quick you're going to hire somebody and this budget's going in. So there might be a couple months where that position's not filled. And that's where you end up seeing a savings when you see the financial statements, and you'll see an underrun or, under expenses in your accounts. Everybody else was put in at the actuals. And what we did is we took out the director of leasing and added the assistant executive director. And then if you go about halfway down, the resident service coordinator used to be part-time. It's like halfway down, you can see the 22, and we put it in as full-time for a full-time position. So whenever that gets adjusted, that'll happen. And then the last line is basically the public relations officer that's getting added in. You already have the person there, but they're getting paid as a contractor as opposed to an employee. And if the position wants to be kind of not short-term, but might be long-term going forward, and that's a position that the Housing Authority wants, it should really be in the salary line item. Because it is a salary, it is a employee. And that's where, you'll go employee versus subcontractor. Well, they're subcontractor if they're going to work for 6 months, but if they're going to, if you're going to have that position and that's something that the Housing Authority wants to build in, remember your reserves are excellent. This is easy to do. Then it should be in the salary line item as opposed to the administrative line item that we talked about before. So that's page 3. That's the administrative salaries. The page 4.
Let's pause there and see if there are any questions here.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ed.
All right, got to unmute yourself. Unmute.
sorry, I thought I did. I
It's okay.
apologize.
Don't worry about it.
Where does the salary for the after-school manager director show?
I don't even know who that is. Angie, what?
He's actually not an employee of the Housing Authority. He's that's the kid that runs the after-school program. He's been there for years.
I believe the motion that was carried said that new position was going to be paid by, paid for hours worked as an employee.
As a manager director.
I guess the question would be, as I hear it, if we're going to have a permanent after-school program director, which we have had for many years, as a matter of fact, and been paying for it as a contractor, Rick, to you from an accounting point of view, would the same principle apply?
Can I
that-
interrupt for a minute? We
Yeah.
actually, I just thought of it. We actually raise money. So the housing authority donates 5,000 and then we get $5,000 donated from like the town of Needham, like different agencies throughout the town. So he doesn't get paid for our budget except for the $5,000 that
Right.
we donate.
It's kind of like a standalone program. So
Correct,
it wouldn't really be part of this budget because it wouldn't be charged to
Right.
any of these programs.
right.
Because you have a set of books called after school program
That's
that
right.
gets grants and that grants covers his
That's right.
costs.
Correct,
So it's kind of separate.
right.
Yes, it is, except that a motion was made and passed by the board that the executive director or the new manager director for the reopening of the program would be paid by the hour by the housing authority.
But it would still get charged to that program, right?
Well, I would assume it would be somewhere on this list of administrative salaries or expenses.
Okay, well,
Eleanor, you have something you can add here?
So I just have a question about the budget. So you're mentioning that the after-school program is funded through donations and other sources. So I guess if you could just clarify, well, two things. One, it seems like this budget here is the budget that goes to DHCD for things to be charged to DHCD or
as well as your federal programs. Yeah.
and federal programs. So I
And
guess my
Section
question
8.
is there some other budget or part of the budget that covers things? Are there other things like the after school program that are funded through other
Well,
sources?
we do
that
we do the books for the after school program, but we don't do a budget for it. I don't know who does a budget for it because it's not, somebody does a budget for it, but
I mean, because I just wanted to clarify that, I mean, the housing authority is still paying for the expenses associated with it. It's just that it sounds like we get, funds that are not from the state or the feds to pay for those expenses. And maybe there are other expenses not associated with the after school program that we also get funding that doesn't come from the government for. And I guess I just want to clarify that those are still, whether it's on this budget or not, it's still expenses of the housing authority. And so I think we should, I mean, maybe it's not made, and it seems like it should be, if not necessarily part of this process, because we need to, this is like a DHCD process and we have to submit this to DHCD. Maybe we wouldn't submit that to DHCD, but it still seems like it should be something that the board looks at in addition to.
okay, so I mean, Angie, you're gonna have to get involved in this. Like, do you guys prepare a budget for this?
So, no.
Does
So
anybody?
Penny, you can step in because you were part of that program for years. From my understanding, it doesn't come out of our budget at all.
Right, but
it's
is there,
donation.
but
So
hold on.
it's a funded position through donations. Donations go away, the position goes away. That's in any housing authority. It's not a position of the housing authority. It's just a position that's funded, right, Penny?
Can I?
Well, at this
chime in
point,
here a
Right, 'cause
second?
it's still
We
up to the
have,
school.
Go ahead,
can you hear
Penny.
me?
Yeah, but you're getting
Oh, sorry,
feedback.
turn my-
You need to turn yours off.
turn my-
Okay, I'll turn mine on. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and I can hear you. In the past, you're correct, Angie, that's the way it worked, kind of like, nobody really officially involved. But now we've passed a motion.
I'm sorry,
Hire
Penny,
the
we're getting
director.
feedback again.
That position has not been posted yet.
We can't
Ed
hear
needs
you,
to
Penny.
mute Penny. Ed needs to mute.
Ed, you'd like to turn yours down.
I thought I could turn it off at the computer, but it's not.
Okay.
Start over,
Yeah,
Penny,
yeah.
because we could not hear anything you said. Go ahead.
Anything, okay. The way it was funded in the past was that
No, I'm
when I
sorry,
was
we're
running
getting
it, I wanted
feedback
to grow
again.
it, so
We're
I
getting
raised my-
feedback again, sorry.
He's not muted on his laptop.
You're not muted enough or something yet. You've got to
I've
mute
got it
yourself.
off in 2 places. I'm sorry.
So can you two folks move to separate rooms or anything like that?
Want to, and
Yeah, let me see if I can sign on my tablet.
turn yours.
Am I muted? Oh, I'm not muted.
I'm sorry. This is
Now we
crazy.
can hear you, Penny. Go ahead.
All right. In the past, Angie is right. The Housing Authority would give some money to the after-school program. Everything else was up to really me as the service coordinator, raising the money. And the more we wanted to do, the more money I raised. Now we're looking at a different format, really, because we passed a motion at the last, at the October meeting, creating a position called manager director. And that description and that job is supposed to be paid for by the Housing Authority. And the job has not been posted in almost 2 months.
Paid
That
by the
doesn't
housing
mean
authority or, hold on.
Who's there now?
Wait a minute. Well, let's do it one at a time because I think, go ahead, Eleanor, you're
Well,
next.
I just want to clarify some terminology here. So this isn't going to the merits of the issue here, but it's just going to the fact that the after-school program is a program of the Housing Authority, and the funds that are donated, while maybe they're restricted to use for the after-school program, they're donated to the Housing Authority. So they are Housing Authority funds for which our board is responsible. And so I just want to clarify when people are saying, oh, it's not a program of the Housing Authority or it's not Housing Authority funds. I mean, from my understanding, it is a program of the Housing Authority and the money comes to the Housing Authority. So it is Housing Authority funds and it's a Housing Authority program. It just isn't funded under the government programs that are
Correct,
described in this budget. So
correct.
I just want to clarify that.
No,
for
that's
everyone.
right. That's
Um,
right. That's 100% right.
Well, to extend Eleanor's point then, where I think you put your finger on something, and I've been around not as long as Penny, but during roughly the same period, that there has not, to my recollection, while I've been on the board, been a separate, to answer your question, Eleanor, a separate budget for how should I say this, Rick? Help me out, correct me, for funds that are not subsidies from either HUD or DHCD. This is the budget for the subsidies for.
It's almost like a secondary program.
Right. And that,
Right.
Really.
Would
that
have
HUD,
something.
let me just finish here one at a time. HUD and DHCD pay for certain things, and that's what's in this budget. So they'll pay for a full-time resident services coordinator, hopefully, and they have been paying for a half-time resident services coordinator position up to now. Everything we're looking at is what we can submit to DHCD and to HUD, once we approve this, and expect money to hopefully to come in to pay for this next year. But perhaps what we're identifying here, that again, if my recollection is correct, is there has not been a formal budget that was bought, going back to Penny's day a few years ago, but even after Penny, the budget that was brought that said, here's the budget for our non-DHCD subsidized, non-HUD subsidized programs. Does that sound right to everybody? Did I summarize that right? Rick, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
This goes back for Angie's time, and Angie would have just inherited what was in place from Bernie before Angie and Paul before Bernie and so forth and so on, going all the way back years. And I think maybe the action item out of here, if I can summarize for everybody, and we can then move on this here, is for Angie and Rick and I will participate to look into maybe there's this missing piece of the 2022 budget that's been missing for 10 years.
No.
No, it hasn't been missing.
No. Like this is getting too confusing now. Okay, you've got this after school program and there's been somebody that's been running it and they've been getting paid.
Mhm.
Okay. So it has nothing to do with any of these programs.
That's what I'm trying to
Nothing.
say.
Right.
I'm sorry if I misstated it, but that's what I'm
So
saying. It has
we're not
nothing to
really
do with
missing
you.
anything, but
Yeah.
you could, I don't understand if you want to hire somebody and put them under the payroll, they would still get charged to that program,
Yes,
Right.
right? Right. So you could hire somebody tomorrow and it doesn't matter because it has nothing to do with this.
right. Go ahead, Eleanor.
But the point is that, I mean, so as a board, we're responsible not just for the government funding that we receive and the government fund budgets, but we're responsible for all the funds that the Housing Authority receives. So I think what Reg is saying is that the idea that we would get a budget for these non-government funds and then, approve that. It's separate from what you've prepared, Rick,
Right.
and separate from what would go to DHCD or the Fed, but still it falls within our fiduciary responsibilities. And, if we're going to be spending money on something, we should, there should be a budget for it and we should approve that. Even if it's like, it's not part of these government fund budgets.
Right. Well, somebody that would have to actually be running that program would have to do that budget.
And that's what
They're
I'm
the only ones that
suggesting.
would know.
And what I'm suggesting is that we set this as an action item to follow up on, so we can continue this meeting. And if that's okay with everybody.
Sorry, I have one question about it. So I know that that there's some discussion of, or, talking about the job and posting it and that sort of thing. Is the after school program director an allowable cost, or is any portion of that would any portion of that be an allowable cost under for DHCD or HUD?
I've never seen it before, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't be allowable. That's not really that would be up to you guys.
I mean, because I guess what I'm just trying to figure out is, would it, if it is not an allowable cost, then it's clear that all of that cost has to go into that sort of, what do we call it, like extra funding budget, and would not be included in this. And so
The state would probably say no.
yeah,
The feds would be okay because they don't really look at your salary, like they don't micromanage your salaries like the state does. And your reserves are phenomenal in the federal programs. So, if you hired somebody and the costs exceeded the grants for that program, I think, that's kind of the fear, right? That you'd run it at a deficit. First of all, you could charge it to the $650,000 that you have in the management program that's left over, which is what I would do, because I really wouldn't want to charge it to one of those programs unless, I don't know. I've never seen a position like that in a budget, and I do 70 housing authorities. I mean, I could put it in. I don't think anybody's going to say anything if that's what people want to do at some point, but I would kind of maybe want to see a budget, a projection, and I know nothing about this. This is kind of news to me right now.
Can I add also that that this benefits only residents in our federal housing program? It does not benefit any of our state residents.
Okay, well, that's even better.
So
that makes it even, okay, so what would I do? If I was doing this, I would say, if you want to put the person through payroll, put them through payroll, they would get charged 100% to the program. And if it ran at a deficit at the end of the year, whatever the difference was, would get charged to the federal program. That's what I would do.
Yes, go ahead, Penny.
Yeah, in the minutes from last month, or from October, it says, number 2, the manager director will be an employee of NHA and will be paid for hours worked. And that was a motion that was passed.
Okay, well, that's fine. You can do that. Like I said, you could do that now. I mean,
Right.
like I said, because they're going to get paid and they're going to get charged to that program.
Mhm.
Right. So what I'll do when I see that person, when I do the books every month, I'll see the payroll. I'll know who the person is and I'll charge them 100% to the after school program. And then, you know, and maybe I'll put them on my reserve summary so you can see how the program's doing.
I was
You know,
wondering
month
what
by
that
month.
was.
Because you're gonna want to know that. You're gonna want to know how it's doing month to month if you're gonna start, you know, put salaries in the, you know what I mean? And then we'll see how it's doing. But and then if it, you know, if it's running at a deficit, the federal can absorb the difference. And if it is yeah, I mean, that would be the easiest and smartest and cleanest way to do it. And best way to do it for everybody to understand.
Just want to tell you people, you see the orange lamp in back of me? I've got another one to the side of me, and I think it's reflecting on me. I look like I've been at the beach.
Yes, you're right. You look like you have a sunburn. Absolutely.
And I can't adjust it.
So-
Try turning it off.
So let's can we keep moving along here and leave it up to Angie and Rick to translate into something that we proceed forward with, which is to have this approach of using the federal funds.
Turn yours on.
No. You're gonna use the after-school funds.
And then, but have the federal funds as a
Yeah.
backup.
I mean, you're like 5 steps. First, you gotta actually decide what you're gonna pay somebody. You gotta figure out what you're gonna get them for the hour. You gotta figure out what the grants are gonna be.
We
You gotta-
we already have been paying somebody for several years, is all I'm trying to say.
Right.
So what I'm trying to do is move this along and have somebody write down what we decided, you know, what we're going to be doing for the fiscal 22 here. And then, you know, we can look at it and make sure that that's the way we want to go forward. Yes,
You've
Ed.
already kind of voted on it.
The HUD has,
No, I'm sorry, Ed, you've got feedback now.
okay. Can you turn that on?
I'll turn mine on and you turn yours on.
I'm trying to talk. You gotta turn yours on. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ed.
Okay. HUD has a
No, you're starting to echo again.
I have to turn your speaker on.
I'm on.
I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about your speaker.
Okay.
So I think we gotta keep moving along here, or you two have to go to separate rooms or something.
All right, tell them that HUD has a TOP program, which is Tenant Opportunity Programs for upward.
Maybe Ed, you could put that in an email or something here, because there's got any feedback
Can
here.
you hear me through Penny's computer?
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to ask you both
I
to
know.
mute at this point,
Is it
please.
possible?
All right.
Can you
Let me see
both
if I can
mute?
log on.
Okay, Ed's gonna try to log on his iPad in another room. I was unable to log on my iPad. That's the problem.
Okay, so we got, I can also mute you from here. Maybe that's easier. Let's go on, Rick, to the next page, okay?
Okay, we gotta get moving here a little bit.
Yeah,
All right. Okay, so page 4 is just the maintenance wages. And like I said before, those are based on labor and industry. So there's really no wiggle room there. And one of the things that I always do is, if you look, we budgeted $32,000 for maintenance overtime, which is at the bottom. That will cover the increase that they get in April, and we don't know what it's gonna be yet. You know, because you guys will get a letter in March telling you what the labor and industry rates are gonna be effective April 1st. And so what we do is we always budget enough in maintenance overtime to cover that increase. Because you're not allowed to, like say, if you look at Brian's rate, you know, I can't estimate a 2% increase and put that in there, or they'll just kick the budgets back. You got to put in what their actual rate is at the time when you submit the budget. And then we budget enough for overtime to cover it, which is why if you looked at your statements, you'll see your underrun in maintenance labor for the year, you know, because we cover it. We make sure we put enough in there to cover any of your maintenance costs. So that's just how that works. Page 5 is the non-routine list. Remember I said we spent $50,000 on non-routine items in the state program? That's the first column. And then I also, if you look at the 65-1, that's the federal program. You know, so the schedule has both programs on here. And really the only thing a big thing that Gary gave me was a new dump truck. So you can see that we have the new dump truck in there for estimated $60,000. It's the last item on the list in the kind of like 2/3 down on the page. So I know the dump truck's been talked about before. So it's in there this year. It fits. There should be no problem with affordability. So if you need the new dump truck and you want to buy the new dump truck, it's in the budget. So you've got it. Page 6 is just the 689 program, which is the Matthews House. And, a lot of the changes are a little similar. I don't know if anybody remembers this. I don't want to get into this too much, but at one point DHCD said they were paying the housing authority too much for rent because they were increasing it by like 4% every year. And they said it should have been a cost of living, which was much less than that. So they adjusted your rent down. So that's why, that the program's not making the money it used to. But just think about this, for 8 units, if you go down to the bottom, the reserve's $45,000. So that's excellent for a program that small. As long as you budget, you break even and, you have a healthy reserve there. So if something happened over there and you need to do some work, you've got the reserves to do it. So just keep that in mind. So those are just 2 state programs. That's all you need to vote on in terms of getting the budgets into DHCD, which they're due December 31st. Angie has the CERT pages. Just at some point, everybody has to sign them, even if they're not here tonight. Like they won't accept the budget certs unless everybody signs them. So you're familiar with that, right, Angie? Right. And when I do the state budgets, even though I'm doing the state, I do the federal as well, because like I said, salaries get allocated across the board. The expenses get allocated across the board. The federal program, if you go down to the bottom, you can see has a reserve of about $700,000, which is excellent. A lot of the line items, have the same increases as the state. There's really nothing overly tricky here. One of the things I did increase this year in the federal is like, we always seem to spend more in legal than we budget. That's the one line item that it doesn't seem like I think it should, it always just one way or the other, you end up spending more than I budget. So I made sure I budgeted that appropriately. We don't know what we're getting for subsidy yet in the federal program. I put in the 2021 amounts that they gave us, but I'm going to bet given the history and given the climate, you're going to get more money next year, even more money than you got this year. Once again, if you spent every dime in this program, every single dime, your reserve would be $700,000. That's probably double what it was 5 years ago. So all your reserves have built up over the last 4 to 5 years, which is exactly what you want because it gives you flexibility. And, you want to have flexibility in these situations. Reserve looks excellent. 2/3 of the dump truck is in there. Go ahead, Penny.
Did you go to page 7?
Yes, we're on page 7.
Yep.
I had a question on page 6 about the administrative salaries for Matthews House went down by 19%. Did they lose somebody? Or?
No, I reprorated somebody because the rents went down. So I couldn't allocate the salaries the way I used to because I don't know if you remember this, but like 2 years ago, they reduced the rent that they were giving us for that program. Okay. And the state got involved in that. And yeah, there was just no getting around it. And you have the ability to charge those salaries any way you want. And it just, whatever you can afford to charge there, you charge there. Whatever you can't, you can't. And that's why in the federal, even with the costs going up substantially, you're still budgeted to make $50,000 next year. So the reserves are still going up, even with, getting an assistant executive director, putting a person on payroll, getting an actual office. You're still making money. It's not crippling you. Because I was a little concerned when I started doing the budgets, how this would all play out. When I started putting the numbers together, knowing I was putting in some pretty big expenses for a new office, administrative office. But, when I got like halfway through it, I knew it was all going to work. And I knew it was all going to look pretty good. So that's your federal public housing. of which you don't submit a budget to anybody. That's your internal budget. And these are the numbers that'll be on the operating statements next year. Just, when we, start doing the statements for next year. Page 8
Wait a
is your,
second.
yeah,
Page 7, the resident services is $10,000 across the board. Is
That's
that
right.
resident organizations also? Is that the same thing as the previous
that's right.
one?
If you use it, it's there and it's allowed because there's not a restriction as much. That number's been in that budget for probably 15 years.
And if it's not spent,
It just doesn't get
goes
spent.
into the reserve?
It goes, yeah, it flows in your reserve, right? It's not like something you have to give back or anything.
So that may be why the reserve is building up, or one of the reasons, because we only
No,
have.
no,
one
that's not
resident-
why. That's such a small amount. The reason why it's going up is because the feds are giving you a ton more subsidy than they used to.
Okay,
That's the main reason the reserves are going way up. They're giving you, they used to, so what, I'll get in this. I do a subsidy calculation for the feds when all the factors come out. They usually don't come out till January or February. Then when I do it, say it comes out to $500,000. Then they say, well, we're going to fund it. We're not going to fund you. We're going to fund that at 80%. So we're really only going to give you 400,000. Last year, they funded it at like 112%. So instead of giving you 500,000, they gave you 550, which I didn't expect. So that's why the reserve's been going up, because they've been increasing the subsidy factors over the last couple of years to give housing authorities more money. And they did the same thing with the CARES money that they gave you. And they did the same thing with the Section 8 program, which is your federal leased housing program that Dedham used to manage until last year. Actually this year, the year that's almost over, 2021. So next year is the first full year that you will have the Section 8 program. And right now, your reserve there is 140,000, right around 140, $145,000. That was basically zero 3 years ago. So what happened is they gave you some CARES money. And once again, the amount that HUD's giving housing authorities has gone up. The only thing you can use that for is for administrative costs related to the Section 8 program. So to lose $3,000 when your reserve's 140 isn't that big of a deal. Actually, it's okay to lose money in this program because you can't use it like for the truck. You can't use it for a portion of the truck. 10 years ago, you could. Now you can't. It's only administrative costs. And to be honest, the new admin fees haven't been published yet for 2022. So I wouldn't be surprised if your admin fee is going to be higher than what I projected at the top of $163,000. So you're going to probably be budgeted. You're probably going to break even, make a little bit of money as long as you stay fully leased, which you seem to be doing. So the transition, I don't know how Angie thinks about the transition, but from our point of view, the transition financially looks like it worked. There was a big worry there moving it into the housing authority if the housing authority could afford it. And you've been able to afford it. So that was a relief. And once again, you've got a super excellent reserve. I have housing authorities that have Section 8 reserves that are like $10,000, $15,000. They gave us a big chunk of CARES money last year, which you could use for operating costs. So it was basically like an extra grant to run the program. So there are no restrictions on that. So you got a good base here. And even if you lost a few units during the year and say you'll only get admin fee on the units that you have leased. So right now, say you have 120 leased. If you went down to 115, and you lost a little bit of admin fee, you would still be okay. You wouldn't be like in big trouble or there'd be a dire situation. So that's your federal leased housing program. Once again, excellent reserves. If you added it all up, you added them all up, you'd be over $1 million in reserves. And the last page is just, in the old days, when you guys were managing Wellesley, you had a management program. We still occasionally charge things here. What if you had consultants or something like that, or I know, there's some demo stuff that might be happening, some rehab renovation stuff. And I always just print this out. So you can see that if you look at the bottom, you have about $650,000 in there. And occasionally there's going to be expenses at the housing authority that get charged there. if they're not like, state or federally specific operating costs. And, so that's it really. I mean, you've got 4 programs, all with great reserves. And then this was the High Rock, mostly this was the High Rock management fee when the thing was developed. That's in this management program, as well as some remaining leftover reserves from when you were managing Wellesley. So that's pretty much how that looks. Everything looks good. It's a really good budget, and I do a lot of housing authorities, and I'll tell you, if it didn't look good, I'd be the first one to tell you.
Eleanor, you have a question there?
Yep, go ahead, Eleanor.
Oh, yes, I just had a question about, so I know you said that for the federal budget, we don't submit it to HUD. And is that because really because HUD, it's all just depends on how the subsidy is calculated. And once that's done, HUD doesn't really care what the
Correct.
budget is.
Correct. DHCD is much more micromanaging of your budget. HUD, what HUD looks at is really looks at the year end that I do to make sure everything's okay. They don't want budgets. People stopped submitting budgets to HUD probably 12, I can't even remember. It was a long time ago, maybe 12, 15 years ago. The only time you have to submit a budget to HUD, a federal budget to HUD, is if you're a troubled housing authority. Then they want to see everything. So you don't ever want to become a troubled housing authority, or you will be sending them paperwork about 3 inches thick every single month. Because I have helped housing authorities that got in trouble and called me, and the amount of paperwork they had to do was insane. So we never want to be troubled, and there's nothing here that shows anything or any possibility of that ever happening. So that's why you don't submit a federal budget. You do a federal budget, you just don't submit it.
Are there any other questions or comments from the commissioners? Because also we need to see if there's any resident input as well. Go ahead, Ed.
What I wanted to say earlier was HUD has a TOP program, a tenant opportunity program, that has initiatives that are aimed at increasing upward mobility of residents. And I would ask Angie to explore that, to see what opportunities are available, whether they could be used for an after-school housing program or not. Let's see, there was something else. I guess that really was it. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from anybody else? So I'm going
Can I
to,
just say something?
Yeah.
Can I say something?
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I know it's not Rick, don't bite my head, but it goes back to what Eleanor was saying. I know it's not part of our budget, right? But is there a way, whether we have to do it in-house, whether Celine has to do it, is there a way that we keep track of everything that program is spending? I don't know how Carol did it, whether there was, but.
What are you
she's
talking
right.
about?
The after-school program, is there a way?
Sure,
where
of course there is.
Okay, so we'll talk about that after then, because I do.
No,
think-
right. I mean, there's books for that program. So, I mean, if you guys want a statement for that every month,
Yeah,
I can add that
think we
in.
should. Yeah. I
you
think
want me
we
to do
should.
that? All right,
Please.
so what we'll do is we'll do one at year end, and then we'll do it next year every single month, like a
Perfect.
regular financial statement. And
Perfect.
Angie, you're gonna have to email me that to remind me.
That's fine,
Okay.
I will.
Will you do that, please?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. But I have no problem doing that.
Any other comments or
Yeah.
questions? Go ahead, Ed.
I guess I was messing around trying to get the speakers straightened out when we discussed maintenance. I went back into the basic training for board commissioners, and the ratio of maintenance people for elderly and handicapped is 1 per 80 units, and for family properties, it's 1 per 40 units. So Cooks and High Rock have a total, or High Rock's got a total of 60 plus 10 duplexes, and Cook has 30, so that's 100. So at a ratio of one to every 40, that's 2.5 people that could be there. And Chambers and Linden and Seabeds have 198 units, and 1 for every 80 gives us 2.48 people, and rounding off, that's 5 people. Now, we have 5 people, including Gary. And I have heard Angie say that she is restricted to that number of people. And so my question is, can Gary be taken out of this, that he's allocated to the maintenance people and put into the administrative category?
Well, that wouldn't matter. You can add the position one way or the other. Then they're not looking at this and adding him in. Like, I mean, if
Well,
you want to,
yeah, where I'm going with this, Rick, is
I know, I understand where you're going, but what I'm saying is, if you feel that you need to hire another person, then it doesn't matter where Gary is.
Okay, all right,
You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
it's kind of a separate issue almost. It's like,
okay.
the issue is, do you feel like you don't have enough maintenance?
Well, we've had Brian, who's been out on, I understand, shit, I can't think of what
Disability.
the- Yeah,
Workman's comp.
disability. Say that, Angie?
Workman's comp.
Yeah, workman's comp.
Right,
Thank
so
you.
he's out. I get it.
So can we replace him? Can he be replaced while he's
Well,
on
I
workman's
think what you're
comp?
doing right now is you're using contract labor, right?
We're doing 2, so I'm doing contract labor and I'm using a temporary maintenance staff from a staffing agency.
So you
We're
are
doing
using
both.
extra maintenance staff. You haven't officially replaced him. You know what I mean?
I can't.
Right, you can't until he like retires, I think.
But I think what
Right.
I think what Ed is saying is, I've asked DHCD in the past if I could add Bob Pelletier, because at one time they had, I want to say 5 maintenance men besides Gary, and he said no. He said that maintenance staff is staffed by the amount of units we receive,
By the amount of what?
units that we have. And
Okay,
that I was fully staffed with maintenance, but we could use another maintenance staff.
right. Well, I think you might have had another maintenance man like maybe like 8 years ago. But that's because understand that 1/3 of Brian was getting charged to Wellesley.
Right.
And then a couple of the other guys were getting charged to Wellesley money too. So
Right.
then when you got rid of Wellesley, I had to move them all back into your regular operating budget. So, I mean, I can do the math too. I mean, I think Ed just did it, but I have to do it myself just because. But I mean, I can just say, okay, the 400's all elderly, right? The state program's all
Yes.
elderly.
Correct.
So that's, so just take that and, say 150, I can
Can
do
I,
something. So that would be like basically almost 2 guys, basically.
Well, it's 2.48 with when we had C-beds in there, which is a federal program, but it is elderly.
Right, but I'm just trying to do it state federal, like, you know what I mean? Like, because your problem's the state. Your problem's always gonna be the state. Your problem's not gonna
Okay.
be the feds. If you said to me tomorrow, I want to hire somebody, and I want to charge them 100% to the feds, I'd go ahead.
But they could
Okay.
only work on federal properties. They could only work on federal property.
Well, I mean,
not state. I will follow the rules
okay, according to who?
according to the state. If we're paying them out of.
Okay, hold on though, hold on, stop for a second. This is gonna get confusing now, but that's okay. People get prorated, right? To different programs, right?
Right?
You get prorated to different programs. Do you think you work the exact amount that you get prorated at every single program? Of course not. Of course you don't.
But we're not.
If
charging
30% of
the
your
state at
salary
all.
goes to this, what's that?
We're not charging the state at all for this position.
Well, no, well, you don't even, I'm just saying hypothetical, I'm just saying in theory. I'm not saying do it.
So
I mean-
I think I understand what Rick is saying. And also I think what Ed is saying, and we've all been, and even Angie's been frustrated about this. If there's a way of working another maintenance position or 2, but let's,
Definitely not 2.
No, 1.
let's take 1, okay, into the budget. Even if it means we have to ask DHCD again and have them turn this down again, I mean, is there some way we could think about doing that? I think is what Ed is asking about here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's a question for Rick.
Well,
and
No, I
Andy.
know, but Ed looked like he wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I do. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. That's why I want to move Gary out of the list of maintenance people that are employed in the maintenance position and put him in administrative, because then that would allow us still to have 5 people, but we could add another maintenance.
No, but no. But they're not going to look at Gary that way. They're not going to look at him as a 5th person, because if you move him over to administrative, they're going to say you can't charge that much to administrative salaries. So you're going to have the same problem one way or the other.
Yeah.
let me just
Moving
ask
Gary-
you, I don't know enough about this, the way Rick
Moving
does.
Gary over doesn't, they're not going to look at Gary.
Let me,
I see what you're saying. You're using the calculation of the hours. I see what you're
Right.
saying. But to move him into administrative, I just know the way the state works. They're gonna be like, what are you doing? You
Can
can't
I-
do that.
can I try my question again, and not to you, Rick, and not, can you find some way, however it can be done, we don't know what can and can't be done, that would help Angie get another maintenance person?
That's for me, right? You asking me?
Yeah, that's you. I'm asking you, Rick.
I have been known to work miracles before.
Okay.
I could well, this is what I would do. Okay.
We don't even want to ask, using your
No.
miracle power, your magic. fairy dust.
I would probably submit this and then do it later in a revision. But I think I could get it through. I have to work some numbers in my own head to say yes, 100%. But I mean, I know we used to have more maintenance. We had one more maintenance man, but they were getting charged to that management program. So we had to pull in all the costs. When I'm doing the budget, I'm trying to charge, and I want the state to pay their fair share. I know that's the big phrase these days. But I want to charge them as little as I have to, because they're the weakest program in your housing stock. You know what I mean? So I want to charge as much as I can to the feds, and I think I can get away with a 2/3, 1/3 proration. But first of all, like, what would we want them to be? Like, we'd have to decide what would you want? Would you want another laborer? Probably, right, Angie? I mean, this is where you're gonna think it through a little bit,
Yeah.
and then we'll try to do it. I'll work the numbers and I'll say, this is what it looks like if I do that. Because if I add somebody and I put it into maintenance labor, I'm gonna have to pull some money out of contract costs. That $602,000 number I gave you isn't gonna change. You have to take it out of another line item. They're not gonna give you extra money to cover that position. They're gonna say, you gotta absorb it in your current number that we are allowing you based on the calculation.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking, again, in the interest of time, this is a sense of the issue that Ed is bringing up, with, I think everybody agrees to, and we don't need to know how you do it as much as to see if there's some way to do it. Like you said, you have to go think about it offline here with Angie. That would be great. Is what
Right,
I
because what I would do is I'd start out breaching the subject. So this is more for Ed. And then I would say, well, if you guys are gonna add Gary to the calculation, then we are gonna move him into administrative salaries. But if you are smart enough and understand that he's not really doing the maintenance and he's really like management, then we'll leave him here and just add the other 4 guys to the calculation. And that will demonstrate, based on, I'm gonna assume I know you did the numbers already, that the formula allows for almost 5 guys. And that would be the argument. Absolutely.
And maybe you do it through an amendment, like you said before.
Right.
Figure it out.
It would almost be like, I wouldn't change it all until they were notified until we had to. If we had to, I would do it, because they're even more sticklers with the administrative salary line item than they are with the maintenance. They're obsessed with salaries. The state is. And somehow they've kind of got it to the point where they actually oversee what you charge to the feds too. I don't know quite how they do that. Like, they do that with the executive director. If we put in a raise and we put in a raise for Angie, they'd say, no, you can't do that because the salary schedule says this, and we don't care if it's federal. You still can't charge it there. Because there's been people that have argued that, and there's like court cases and stuff going on about that type of stuff. But if the idea is to explore an additional maintenance guy, then I just need to do my homework and actually work on it a little bit to see what the full amount, because remember, it will be roughly $60,000 and then add another 40% for benefits. So you're really looking at $85,000 added to the budget. You know,
I
say
think that's the idea.
right, and 25,000 of that probably in the end will come out of the state program, which means I'm going to have to find $25,000 out of that 602, those other line items to pull out to cover this. That's all.
Okay, so I'm going to ask, since we're approaching 9 o'clock, we're required to see if there's any questions or input from our attendees here, who are some of which are tenants and residents. Does anybody has a question or comment to make as input to the board? Please raise your hand. And I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I think we've complied with our requirements there. Go ahead, Ed. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Thank you. Looking at the net income on each of the income expense sheets, Linden Chambers is showing a loss of 13.5. Matthews House is showing a profit of 75. Cook Seabeds and High Rock are showing a profit of 53,638. And Section 8 has got a loss of 32.22. So we're showing a net profit of $36,991 according to the recorded net profit per program. My comment is, we passed a motion that we were going to hire a program manager for the Cooks After School program. That has been ignored, and I will not be able to vote positively for this budget unless I have a commitment that we're going to figure out a way to hire that person, and even if they have to, we have to hire them as an outside contractor. So that's where I stand. We have $36,991 showing as a profit. We certainly can afford to hire that person even as an outside contractor, or any other way Rick can handle it.
Right. Well, can I just, okay, I don't want to get involved in this between you guys, but what I will say is if you want to hire the person, you can still vote on the state, because that person's just going to get charged to the after school program and the federal program. Didn't we talk about that earlier?
Yes.
Okay. Right.
But I
so,
want to make sure that I have a guarantee that that's going to take
oh,
place.
well, that's between you guys. I mean, I'm not getting involved in that.
Ed, you know, I understand that we have this on the agenda for next week, but not this week. We're just trying to decide whether we want to approve the budget to
The
go
state
forward.
budgets. The state budgets.
If you want to choose not to vote for the budget for any reason, you can do that. You know, right now we're reviewing whether the budget has been thoroughly put together and thought through by Rick and Angie, and whether it covers all our expenses and whether it includes major new expenses. And the answer is yes, including anything we want to do with the after school program. And you know, I note your comment here, but it's really not relevant to what we have on the agenda for tonight, right? I mean, you can withhold your vote for any reason you want, for whatever you think makes sense.
I would like to guarantee that motion is going to be followed.
From who? How?
I don't know, I guess from you or from Angie.
I can guarantee no such thing. I'm just the chair. I'm a volunteer, unpaid chairman of the board for the time being. And I actually think it's out of order for you to bring this up as a request at this meeting, but you're free to not vote for the budget if you don't want to do that. Go ahead, Penny.
I'm just concerned, I would just like to know from our conversation tonight that there is going to be a way, maybe through the reserves, Rick, as you said. To
Yeah, one way or
pay
the other. I mean,
for
I
manager
don't see why
director.
this wouldn't happen. Like, without getting into what the priorities are at the housing authority, I don't want to overstep my bounds.
Yep.
Financially, it can work.
Possible.
It will work.
Okay.
There's not a
I'm happy
restriction
with that.
financially to this happening.
We
That's
can
that's
deal
all I
with the
can say.
details. We can deal with the
Yeah.
details at the
Yep.
next meeting.
Yes. Whatever, however you guys want to do it.
Are there any other comments before I call for a vote here? Hearing none, we have a motion in our minutes, which are very simple, which is to approve the NHA 2022 budget as I'll add to this motion as we now come to understand it for submission to DHCD and as our budget for the federal housing subsidies that we have. Do I hear a second? Second from Eleanor. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
I,
Any opposed? There are none, so it carries 4-0, and recognizing that Commissioner Janice Bennett could not be here tonight due to a death in the family here. Okay, I think we're at the end of the agenda. Rick, thank you so much, as
All right, well, it
always.
was good seeing everybody or
Thank you.
talking to everybody.
I always
Thanks,
learn
Rick.
something
Thanks, Rick.
new from you,
You're
and
very
I've been doing this
helpful.
for many years, and it's very impressive how much you know, and I very much appreciate it. I think everybody else does here too.
Well, I always appreciate the detail that you go into trying to help us to understand our questions. So thank you again very much.
Oh, anytime. I like it when I talk to boards that actually care, because believe me, there are some that like, oh, the accountant's here. Oh God, you got 10 minutes. Get out of here. I want to go home and eat. So that's great. So
I don't think we've fallen into that category for
never have,
ever.
never have. That's
So,
for sure.
all
All
right.
right. Well, you guys have a good night. It was good
Thank
talking
you.
to everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, Rick.
You too. Thank you. Bye.